QuickBooks Online Advanced for real estate, specifically property management. That's what we're going to be talking about here for the next few minutes. I want to start off by putting a couple of important assumptions in place here. We're talking about a situation where we're managing properties that don't belong to us, right? We're managing properties that belong to other people, which means the rents I receive aren't mine. That's not my money, which means I don't record that as income. I record that as a liability. I take money in. I'm holding on to money that belongs to my customer, the property owner. And then I'm authorized to make payments out of that funds on their behalf to take care of the ongoing maintenance expenses and other expenses related to managing that property. And then I have to do an accounting of that to show the property owner, here's how much we've taken in, here's how much we've paid out, this is the difference. And of course, the one conversation that's going to come up frequently is, how much of that money do you want me to write you a check for? And in some cases, some property owners deplete the management company entirely of all the excess funds. And in other cases, there's usually, and of course the better practice, in my opinion, is that there's some sort of a prudent reserve established where they leave at least a certain amount behind so that the property management company can function and manage the expenses of the property as it goes. So that's important, because what this means is most of the action here is going to happen on the balance sheet, which has a lot of reporting implications. And there's also some compliance issues which have to be kept in mind that are very, very important. And I'm going to kind of walk you through and explain all of that. Oftentimes the question comes up with property management as to whether or not you should track your properties using the customer list or the class list. Well, without a doubt, it has to be the customer list, because we want to use invoices to track the rents, and I can only do that through the customer list. I can't invoice a class. I can only invoice a customer. So we're going to take a look at how that gets set up, but it definitely needs to be the customer list. You can certainly use classes as well, but customers, critically necessary, have to have them. Let's take a quick look at the products and services that we need to set up here. I'm going to go into my gear icon over to products and services. QuickBooks Online, when you first set up a company, gives you these kind of standard products that are tied into, they're like the default products to be used in certain areas. To this day, I've yet to figure out if there's a way to unlink them in some way so that I can make them inactive. I haven't figured that out yet. So in the meantime, I just categorize them and call them admin, so I can actually easily keep them out of the way, because now I can just say category, show me only the property management, and that kind of gets them out of the way off the list. Now, the property management products and services are what I've created here. And you'll need one of these for every single property. This is the item that's going to be used when you invoice for the rents. And instead of mapping this to rental income, which is what you'd do if it was your own property, this has to be mapped to a corresponding rents and trust liability account on the chart of accounts. So you'll see that here. You'll see that I've got the rents and trust liability as the parent, and then here's the sub-account for this particular property, rents and trust 2416 Victory Boulevard, right? And so that absolutely has to work, because we have to, like I said, take in the rents and put them in a liability account to show it's not our money, okay? Really, really important. Security deposits, you only need one, because as I'm going to show you at some point in the next few minutes, you can run a report on the security deposits off the balance sheet and get a look and subtotal that by building and unit, so that you can track all the security deposits in one place. But because here we're invoicing to capture the rents, this needs to be, and because that's getting mapped to a separate liability account, and that's the key difference. Security deposits all in the same liability, rents each in a separate liability account for that particular property. So again, we need one of these for each property. We only need one security deposits for the whole thing. And again, I'll show you why and what that looks like in a few minutes. Let's take a look at the chart of accounts, because obviously we've already started to poke at that. Some of the key things we need, or let's put it this way, I suggest a separate security deposits bank account. Keep all the security deposits in a separate bank account. Some states require this, not all, but even if your state doesn't, I highly recommend doing this. And one of the good reasons why is you'll see we've got $13,000 in security deposits here. And this way, at all times, I can confirm that that exactly equals my security deposits payable, or security deposits liability account, which as you can see is another account we need on the chart of accounts, and that's here, and you can see I've got them synced up. Then each property needs to have its own bank account. Now you'll see that in this case I have $15,112.14 in there, And if you look at the corresponding liability account for this particular property, it's got more. It's got $18,362. The difference is sitting in accounts receivable. So at any given time, the way we would need to reconcile the trust accounting for a particular property is we look at what's in that property's bank account. In this case, I have only one building right now in this example, so I can use this number. Normally, we'd need to run an accounts receivable report, which we can easily do to see how much is in accounts receivable for that particular property. So we take the balance in the property's bank account plus the balance in accounts receivable for that property, and that has to add up to the rents and trust liability for that property. And as you can see, if you do the numbers, you can pause the video and check me. If you take this plus the 3250, you'll get the 18,362.14. So that absolutely works. Now, traditionally in property management, if I'm managing my own properties, there's going to come a time when somebody moves out and I have to withhold some of their security deposit and keep it to cover my costs to ready the apartment for re-rental. And that would normally go to an income account called security deposits held. And I do have that account in here, security deposits withheld income, but we're never going to use it here for the reasons I already explained. That's not our money. That money belongs to the property owner. So when we withhold that money in security deposits, effectively it's going to come right back into this account. And of course, we transfer the security deposit after we're done with the move-out process from the security deposit bank account into the property's main bank account, right? So I only have so much time, so I can't go into all the details of how to record everything today, but I am going to cover this kind of high-level overview for you. So to get into the details of how to record the transactions on the move-out, I've got a course coming out very soon that's going to explain all of this step by step in great, great detail. Okay, so that's the basics of the chart of accounts that we need to set up. In some way, it simplifies things when we're doing trust accounting because all the money goes in through this bank account for the property and it goes right back out through this same bank account for the property. And on the other side of that is always the rents and trust for that property. So everything goes in and out through this one liability account, which means when we record things like a plumbing expense or some kind of a repair, we've got to be really careful to make sure we're detailed about putting things in the memo, because when we run reports, and I'm going to show you this in a minute, when we run reports on this stuff, we want to make sure it's clear what was a plumbing expense and what was a repair, because the owners, our clients, the property owners, at some point are going to question us, and they're going to say, why did we have to spend so much? Let me see that plumbing bill, right? So you're going to want to make sure everything is, because we don't have a plumbing expense account to run a report off of, we're going to want to be really detailed in our memos when we're recording these transactions. Really, really important stuff. So essentially the main thing setup-wise I've just gone through with you is in the chart of accounts and in the products and services, right? And then the other piece is the customer list. Let's go take a look at that. So the customer list is pretty straightforward, I think. We're going to set up a customer for the property, and then we set up a sub-customer for each unit. And as you can see, if it's vacant, we still list it here and we indicate that it's vacant, right? Now, in the videos I've already recorded on this, we had my good friend Matthew Fulton in Unit 1, and then he moved out. So that's why you're seeing this vacant, and Unit 5 is vacant. And then we have my friends Greg Culp, Linda Artisani, and Lisa Voss all still living here. Greg's got a balance outstanding. He didn't pay his rent last month. And Linda, when you eventually, if you take the course and see the whole video, you'll see she only paid half her rent. And I did that on purpose to kind of show what it looks like in the reporting when you have these different kind of scenarios or situations. So this is how you'll set up your customer list for every building. Each building is a customer, and each unit in that building is a sub-customer within that. And that way we can record and memorize the invoices for each unit and have them automatically post every single month, which is really, really critically important, right? Then one of the reasons that it's so important to me to do this with QuickBooks Online Advanced are the custom fields that we have access to. So let's go take a look at that. If I go into my gear icon, here's the custom fields. Notice it's new as of the time of this recording. And we're going to create 3 custom fields, and this is for the reporting, and this is for, in property management, the standard main report is called the rent roll. We can't get a true rent roll out of this, but we can get pretty close. And the key driver to that is setting up these custom fields. What's great about QuickBooks Online Advanced is not just the fact that they're custom fields, it's that these fields can be configured based on, for example, a date, right? So I'm going to edit this just so you can quickly see the setup, right? We do move-in date. It's used on sales forms. And the type here that I created when I set it up was date. When you're first setting it up, you're given a choice, right? The monthly rent, the type is a number, okay? And the security deposit, of course, is also set up as a number, right? So we need to create these 3 fields, and then if I go back to my customer list, you'll see that for each and every customer, if I go into Greg and I edit him, here are my custom fields, and I've keyed in the amounts. His security deposit is $5,000. It's 2 months rent. There's his move-in date, and there's his monthly rent. And you can pull reports based on this date because it is a true date formatted field, which is nice. Okay, and then right from here, as you can see, we can add another custom field if we wanted to. Okay, so the custom fields is one of the critical parts of this, and it really comes into play in the reporting part of things, right? Really important. Don't have that available in any other version of QuickBooks Online. Got to have QuickBooks Online Advanced to be able to do that. Okay. Now let's take a look at some of the reports. Because as I've mentioned, we're going to record the invoices and we're going to set them up. I'll show you real quick. The recurring transactions list has all the invoices. You know, there was a unit 1 in here originally, and then once somebody moves out, part of the move out process is you have to delete the recurring transaction. Obviously, you wouldn't want to record rents for somebody who's no longer there. So you can see I've got recurring invoices set up for each tenant. They're configured to go off on the 1st of each and every single month. And what that allows me to do is on the 2nd of the month, and I mentioned this in the course videos, it's really critical that you have a workflow in place that ensures that somebody's going to post all the rents received, like by first thing on the 2nd of every month. Because you're going to want to go in and create some of these custom reports that I've got. And we can run the open invoices, which is cool, but we can also just run the rent history detail open, meaning the unpaid stuff, right? And so I can see who hasn't paid. And notice what I've got here. I've got those custom fields laid out right here, so I can see very clearly in Greg's case what his security deposit, what his monthly rent. Notice I've also included his contact information on this report because when I run this report, I want to be able to reach out to him quickly and say, hey, Greg, what gives? We need to get your rent. We haven't gotten your rent yet, right? And then same here with Linda, and you can see very clearly the way this report is configured. Here's the normal rent amount. The open balance is half of it. So obviously she's paid half and she's left half unpaid. So we'd want to give her a call and find out what's going on there. So that's the key. And so these reports begin to take on a little bit of the form of a rent roll. Like I said, it's not a true rent roll, but it's pretty close. If I run this version of the Open Invoices report, it looks actually identical to what you just saw. So it's really just 2 different ways of approaching the same thing. The real critical difference, though, is that run in this format that I showed you here. Again, on the surface, it looks no different. But what this really is a customer balance detail report that I tweaked, to show the custom fields. And what you can do from there is you can derive this report, which is a rent history detail for one tenant. And that's where I can run this and see the entire history for Greg. And then I can easily swap this out by customizing it, right? And going into the filters and changing the customer. I can uncheck Greg and I can check Linda off. And I can run this for her. So this is a derivative of the customer balance detail report that could not have been created off of the Open Invoices report, which is what the other one was. So these are some of the critical reports that I set up and kind of suggest that you look at. And then we have the security deposits payable. So I'll show you what that looks like. And as I said earlier, all I need is one security deposits payable account because I can do this. I can run a report that shows it grouped by tenant, right? And you can see here was Matthew. He moved in February, moved out in August, right? We got a security deposit when he moved in. We paid out his security deposit. We didn't pay him out the full amount. The course explains how that works, but obviously we zero out the entire security deposit when he moves out and pay him whatever the difference is between that, any uncollected rents, and any amounts we're withholding to ready the apartment for re-rental beyond normal wear and tear, right? And here's everybody else's. So security deposits payable, easy report, and now you can see why we only need the one liability account for all the security deposits, especially if you're going to make the choice, as I suggested, to keep a separate security deposits bank account. It's just a good idea on a lot of levels. So going back to the reports real quick, the other report is the activity report. So this is where when the owner comes in and says, hey, I need an accounting, I don't understand, why there's not more money in my rents and trust liability. This is basically a detailed report on that rents and trust liability. It's configured to show the prior month. Obviously, once you're in here, you can tweak this date range to show any period of time that you want. And what this will show you here is the money in. So going into the month of July, we had $33,000 sitting in there. We collected all the rents, right? So that got us to $40,000. And then here we have a disbursement to the property owner. The property owner came in and said, hey, I want $30,000 out of that. You don't need more than $10,000 to run the show here. And of course we'd agree, and we dispersed that amount. But notice, like I said, we've got the detailed, and here's a plumbing bill, right? And so we've got the details here, so it's really clear when they say, what did I spend $900 on? I could say, well, we had to have a plumber come and fix up one of the units. And the rents, all of them should have this. This is just here as an example. You want to put monthly rent on each line item for this very reason when we're running this exact report. Because as I mentioned in the course videos, at some point I might want to run this for, let's say, the entire history, right? I can just say, let's look at the whole history of this rents and trust liability for this property, and it's going to have everything, right? Management fees, other plumbing bills, prorated rents from when they first moved in, all of it here. Notice it's nice and detailed. This explains 15 days is, what they were charged for effectively in that month. So really, really important to be detailed in these memos, because what I may want to do, if you're like me, you're definitely going to want to do this at some point, is dump this into Excel and rely heavily on that memo or description to cut up the data so you can, in a sense, if need be, reformat this almost to look more like a profit and loss statement for the sake of the business owner client. There's one more thing I want to show you, and this is a really cool feature of QuickBooks Online Advanced, the fact that it comes with Fathom included. And I want to show you what I mean. If we go over to the reports area, go up to the standard, we have smart reporting. Now, when your company is new, you're going to have an option here to set it up. It's included, doesn't cost you anything extra. And I've got an example here of something I was able to create. Keep in mind the sample data that I've got here is a bit scaled down, so this is going to look a lot better when you have a whole bunch of properties, and lots of activity in here. And again, bearing in mind the drivers, the assumptions, the context here that we're managing properties that belong to others, so that's going to impact the reporting. Fathom has beautiful reporting, especially if you have income and expenses to show. Here we really don't have much by way of that. We just have the management fees, and of course we'd have the overhead-related property management company expenses, payroll and whatnot. But what I was able to put together was something that I think would be really cool from the property management standpoint. As you can see, I've customized the report. I've got my own image back there. This little pop-up here is showing you what it would look like. You can do like a printed version of the report. I'm not into printing things these days, but if you are, kind of a cool thing that they let you create two versions, because it's going to obviously need a different layout on something that's smaller and printed. Anyway, I've got my logo here. I've got the report titled properly. And let's go down the list and see. So I've written out an introduction kind of explaining the context, right? Making sure it's clear to the readers of this report that most of the money on the balance sheet is not ours. We keep rents and trust for our property owner clients. The only income is our management fees and so on, right? And so you can lay out these really professional looking reports. One thing I did that I want to bring your attention to is I added a KPI in here for the vacancy rate. And if you were paying attention from everything I've shown you so far, I had 4 out of 5 units filled, which is an 80%. I should really call this occupancy rate. It's really more of an occupancy rate than a vacancy rate. So I was at 80% of capacity the whole time, and then I had Matthew move out in the month of August, which is the month that we're looking at here in the reports. So you'll notice it drops down to 60%. It shows you the prior month was 80, so that's a drop of 20%. So Fathom is really cool in that it lets you create those KPIs. I'll show you really quick where I went to do that. So if we go back into our settings, and in the update data section here, this is where I can say, hey, I've made some changes in QuickBooks Online. I can just tap this with my mouse button and it'll grab the most up-to-date information. Down here is where I was able to create what's called a non-financial KPI, right? So if I click here, I can add results. I can import from Excel. So it's really simple. I just created a new KPI. I called it vacancy rate, and then I keyed in the amounts. I wonder if I can retitle this here. I don't see a very quick and obvious way to retitle this. I really should have called it occupancy rate. But you can see how to do this. Very, very easy to do. Fathom has a great interface. It's really intuitive, very easy to follow. I had a single demo for about 30 minutes and pretty much was off and running with this. So now if I go back into my reports, if I go back to the template, I had sort of tweaked it some more. So if I go back in and edit the template, I'll just confirm, yes, I understand. I had gone back in and added this whole KPI section, which includes that vacancy rate. So now that you've seen how I created that, you have sort of context for how this gets in here. That's the kind of stuff I always wonder when somebody shows me something like this and, oh, that's really cool, but how do you get that to happen? That's why I wanted to show you, how to go back into the settings and how I actually created that. Like I said, should have called it occupancy rate. It's kind of the flip side of it. But really cool. And then it gives me some alerts because I chose to add this whole KPI section in. It's warning me about accounts receivable days. I suspect that's because in this example I had a couple of tenants who hadn't paid their rents, so their accounts receivable days were, I guess throwing everything off. And then the quick ratio, which is a liquidity measure, it's giving me an alert that it's less than what's been established as kind of like the threshold, right? And you can establish all that stuff in the settings. First, you have to understand what a quick ratio is. It's a measure of short-term liquidity. How much do I have in current assets available to satisfy current liabilities? That's what the quick ratio looks at. So if it's dropping too low, I get a little warning here in this report, which is pretty cool. And then again, here's the profit and loss, all the stuff you've already seen. So Fathom, definitely a really, really nice addition to QuickBooks Online Advanced. Now I'm just trying to think in terms of how to create reports that I might send out specifically to property owners, where I might chisel the reports down. I got to talk to my friends at Fathom and get their help learning how to do that because, frankly, I'm new to Fathom myself, but I wanted to show you what I've been able to do with it so far in the context of a property management concern, which, like I've said, is a little bit unique in that where all the reporting, all the action is on the balance sheet. There's very little happening on the profit and loss. So that's it, my friends. I think I've given you quite a bit to think about here. As always, you know where to find me. My name is Seth David. My company is called Nerd Enterprises Incorporated. I'm easy to find on the web and in every channel and social media. So if you have any questions, concerns, comments about this, reach out to me. Let me know. I'm very available. More than happy to answer any questions you might have on how to use QuickBooks Online Advanced for real estate, specifically property management.